4 years ago, I uprooted my life in Missoula, Montana, and kind of on a whim moved out to Portland, Oregon. And within a year of living here, I quit my 9-to-5 corporate job and went all in on my small business. So let's talk about exactly what I did to go from corporate girly to full-time freelancer and small business owner in a brand new city where I barely knew anyone. So when I first moved to Portland in 2022, I had been working in the corporate tech space for about 6 years. I was on creative teams working as a graphic designer and art director, and I felt like I had kind of made it in the corporate world. I had recently hit 6 figures. I was moving up in positions across different companies, essentially living the American dream, making a living wage, getting a consistent paycheck, health insurance, had a few weeks a year of PTO. But I was also so burnt out after years of pouring all of my creative energy into other people's goals, other people's businesses. I was generally just over corporate life in general. But during this time that I was working for these corporate creative teams, I learned so much about how to market a product, how to tell a brand story, and how to generally run a business from the perspective of these super successful companies. I was getting all this really great firsthand experience with things like how to manage big creative projects and track tasks, and what kind of software and tools are major creative teams using. And eventually I realized that I could take all of this experience and apply it to my own services. So really just a few months after moving to Portland, I decided to take freelancing more seriously and try to get this business off the ground. Once I decided that I was going to leave the corporate world to work for myself, I made some pretty big life changes. The first thing I did was move out of my swanky ass apartment into a cheap studio. When I first moved to Portland, when I was still making a 6-figure salary, I was living in this really nice high-rise in Northwest, paying almost $2,000 a month in rent and utilities. Once I realized that I wanted to work for myself, I focused on cutting back my monthly expenses as much as possible. And I canceled pretty much all of my subscriptions, all of my memberships, everything that wasn't absolutely essential got knocked off of my monthly budget. So no more gym membership, no more Amazon, no more streaming services. I seriously went down the most broke bitch path of budgeting possible. Because I knew I couldn't be balling out with these fancy apartments, nice gym memberships, all the stuff that I was paying for when I was working this corporate job. I knew I needed to be realistic about dropping those things. During this time, I also pretty much completely stopped going out because up until this point, I had been spending my weekends drinking. And instead, once I decided that I was going to take this business dream seriously, I developed the lifestyle of a hermit and spent every weekend working on this business instead of having a social life. I wouldn't say this was the healthiest lifestyle, but for me, it was necessary to go all in on this dream. So instead of spending the weekends going out partying, I was sitting in my 500 square foot studio apartment, building my website, reaching out to potential clients, developing my brand. I had already created this brand, Yeti Corn, when I was in college. So I already had some brand visuals developed for this, but I spent this time to really hone in on the visual direction of my brand. So I created a distinct color palette, a word mark. I picked some fonts that I was going to use across all of my marketing. In the beginning, I knew I wanted to work with small businesses in the Portland area. So I started to really craft my portfolio on my website to speak to those types of clients. One of the first things I did when I had my brand kind of developed was to make business cards. And I did that through Moo, which I love and always recommend to anybody who needs business cards or really any physical media for your brand. I love Moo for a lot of reasons. Also, this is not sponsored. I literally just am obsessed with their company. One of the main things that I love about them is that when you're ordering business cards, you can create 50 different variants of your cards in one order, which is like a wet dream for a photographer or designer who's indecisive, like me. They also have a ton of options for any type of cute branded media or merch that you want to create for your business. So I also made stickers. You can make thank you cards, flyers, branded water bottles, branded notebooks, anything that you might want, Moo has it. So I started by ordering 200 business cards, and I started slanging those babies everywhere I went. Literally passing them out to Uber drivers, people I would meet at coffee shops, anybody who came my way, I was giving them a business card. This was also how I started to develop the muscle of talking about my brand and my business, which is not something that came naturally to me. Even though I'm outgoing and have worked in this space for a long time, I did not like the feeling feeling of selling myself or having to like talk up my services to random strangers, but it really is a muscle that you build and a skill that you get more comfortable with over time. Through sheer exposure therapy of talking about my business all the time, I finally got more comfortable with pitching myself. In the beginning, I also started by just reaching out to everyone I knew, everyone within my personal circle, friends, family, acquaintances, and I told them that I was starting this business, that I was looking for work, asked them to keep an eye out for anybody who might need the services I was offering, asked them to also spread the word within their communities. This is such a good way to get clients fast. Do not underestimate the power of your own community and the power of word of mouth, especially in this like time of AI slop. It's hard to trust everything that we see online, especially with like online reviews not always being accurate and AI suggestions being all over the place. It can be hard to know when you're getting a good recommendation for something or not. Having that personal connection with people you know or a personal reference goes so far. If I was starting over today and I was starting from scratch building my business, this is exactly how I would start, with my community. And even though I didn't really know that many people in Portland, you would be surprised at how big of a community you can build just through acquaintances, friends of friends, people who know other people. In my first year of business, I also did a ton of cold emailing. I sent hundreds of cold emails in my first year of doing business. And since I was wanting to work with a lot of small business owners, I started by looking up Portland's list of small businesses. They have like a directory of new businesses that are coming out every year. And I literally went down this list one by one, looked up the business, tried to find if this was a business that could use photo video services, and found a contact to reach out to and emailed as many of these people as I could. Now, I'll also do a deep dive into cold emailing in another video, but the basic things that I stuck to that I would recommend for anybody else who is cold pitching brands is keep it short and direct, get to the point immediately, tell them who you are, why you're contacting them, and share links to relevant examples. Cold emailing is absolutely a numbers game. You are going to send out way more emails than you'll get responses from, but it's also a really good way to directly reach people who might be looking for your service. In those early days, cold emailing pretty much landed me all of my first clients. And this was the only time that I was really willing to do free shoots. I reached out to a handful of businesses that I really wanted to work with to create photo and video assets for them to help with their marketing. I was still really intentional with how I offered these free shoots because I didn't want it to just be like an open-ended thing. So I would reach out to businesses that I wanted to work with who were holding events or doing something that was giving back to the community and offer photo coverage for them for free. And this resulted in my first paid jobs with these brands because I did a good enough job with these free shoots that they wanted to continue working with me later on. I also looked into events where my ideal clients would be. And in my case, I was looking for small business owners, so I started to attend a lot of markets where vendors would be showing up to sell their products and services. In the beginning, I reached out to a handful of Portland markets and offered to shoot their events for free. And I brought my beautifully designed business cards from Moo to pass out to any vendors who I met who might be interested in doing a photo shoot. This was another really good way for me to get my brand name out there in the early days and connect with people in the community. In-person connections are worth so much more than a random piece of content that somebody is going to stumble across on their social media. In the beginning, I really poured a lot of effort into real life connections. And when I wasn't slanging my business in person, I was also developing this multi-channel marketing approach online. This is something that I learned directly from working for these big tech companies and has been super successful for me. There's a lot of advice about how to market your business out there, and a lot of people will tell you to go all in on one channel, like focus all of your efforts into growing a community on Instagram or TikTok. But I took the exact opposite approach and I tried to get my name out there on as many channels as possible. I'm also going to do a deep dive into creating a multi-channel marketing strategy as a small business owner. Until then, I'll just do like a quick breakdown of the main channels that I focused on when I was first starting. The first channel I really focused on was my website. I already had a rough portfolio up on my website through Wix, which I've been using for over a decade and I absolutely love as a website host. But I really worked on building up my website from an SEO standpoint to make sure that everything that I was creating and the way that I was building out my pages would help me show up in search results. My website was definitely what I spent the most time on in the beginning. I look at my website as like my home base for my content. This is where I wanted to lead potential clients to learn about me and my work and my process and find educational content about photo stuff. Because if you can really nail your SEO strategy, your website will be working all the time in the background, generating leads for you without you really having to do a ton of work every day like you do on social media. In tandem with my website, I also started a blog. Another great way to increase your search result rankings. Search engines, they want to know that your website is being like regularly updated, and you want to be constantly reminding these search engines what your website is about. And I made a goal of putting out a blog post every 1 to 2 weeks. I also used sites like Answer the Public to actually figure out what my ideal clients are searching for and create content that would be helpful for those people searching for those topics. These blog posts link back to the main content on my website and link to things like my service pages and more info about me. Alongside my blog, I also started to batch post content to Pinterest through Tailwind, which is a content planning software that allows you to post things on a bunch of different channels. So you can sit down and batch schedule out months of posts on Pinterest in one sitting. Now, I feel like Pinterest as a marketing channel is going through a lot of changes right now, especially with all the AI content that's on there, and it's kind of overrun with ads. But if you have a really unique photo shoot concept or a location where you did a shoot at, something like that can do really well on Pinterest and drive thousands of eyes to your work and a ton of traffic to your website. And then the final piece of this multi-channel marketing strategy when I was first starting was to create Instagram and TikTok accounts. I already had a Instagram page with a very small following, but in the beginning I did a photo shoot giveaway through Instagram to drive more eyes to my page. This gave me a pretty big bump in followers when I first started, and I feel like it also helped legitimize my brand and my services and position myself as a legit small business. Now, when I was first starting, I didn't really dedicate a ton of time to social media. My strategy was very much like put out whatever, whenever. And I would say that I struggle with social media the most out of any of these channels because I get sucked into the black hole that is these social media apps, and it can be really overwhelming. So I, in the beginning, tried not to make that my main marketing strategy. Now that I'm 3 years into running this business, I feel like I finally developed a social media strategy that I'm excited to put more time and effort into. But at first I was really just throwing things out there and seeing what stuck. So while I was building all of this, I was still working my full-time job, which is something that I would recommend to anybody who wants to start a business. If you have any form of consistent income, hold on to that income as long as you can while you're getting started. Especially in the like freelancing game, your income in the beginning is probably gonna be pretty inconsistent and you're not gonna always know when or where it's coming from. While you're in this space of uncertainty, you wanna make sure that you have enough money to still pay your bills. You're gonna get to this point where you can't actually handle both your full-time job and growing this business. Once you feel really overwhelmed, it's probably a good sign that it might be time to go full-time with your business. So this was the point that I eventually got to. After building this business while working my full-time job for a little under a year, I realized that I was not able to handle both anymore. I had a decent amount of money saved up, about 6 months worth of expenses. I had a handful of jobs on my calendar over the next few months. So I knew I would be covered with income from my freelancing gigs for at least 2 or 3 months, on top of being covered from my savings as an emergency fund for an additional 6 months. Even though I was terrified to leave my full-time job, I knew I was in a decent place that even if I didn't book a single job after this for 6 to 9 months, I would be able to pay my bills and survive. So roughly a year after moving to Portland, I finally put in my notice at my full-time job and I went all in on this small business. And that was now 3 years ago. And my business has grown a ton year after year since going full-time. And I'm finally at a place where I'm not stressing about income and where I'm gonna get my next jobs from. I'm pretty much booked up for most of the year and know where I'm gonna be getting my income from. Even though I'm at a point now with my business where I feel really secure, It took a long time to get there, and I stressed about where my money was gonna come from, whether or not I was gonna be able to maintain this lifestyle full time. So I'm gonna use this channel to dive into what I did to build this sustainable business and not only make enough money to pay my bills, but also save and invest back into the business and create additional revenue streams. This was really just like the tip of the iceberg, a quick overview of how I started this new business in a brand new city, but we will be diving in more in depth into a lot of these different topics on this channel. I think it's easy to get trapped in this feeling of security with a full-time job, and it can feel super scary and overwhelming starting a business and taking the plunge to work for yourself. But I want to break it down in a way where you can see that it's actually possible and give you the step-by-step blueprint to turn this into a reality for yourself too. Okay, see you at the next one. Thanks, bye! Bye!